welcome, good morning to all of our Wheel and Anchor members to our webinar this morning, which is all about France. And the France Kaleidoscope program is a concept that we put together that follows our philosophy about slow travel. And this program is an opportunity to see 4 different regions from the north to the south of France in 7 and 10-day programs. So even if you've done France before, you probably haven't done the whole country, and there may be a part of the country that is of interest to you and that you'd like to visit. And this is a way to do that. So you can do one or more segments. So first of all, let me say a few words about me. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Gordon, and I've been putting together trips for Canadians this is my 30th year in travel. And I have worked mostly behind the scenes for a lot of my career in organizing trips for smaller and larger travel agencies all across the country, and again, sending Canadians to all parts of the world. And one of the reasons that I started Wheel and Anchor a few years back is because, first of all, I'm a people person, and I really wanted to be more involved with the actual travelers as opposed to just, in the office putting itineraries together. But also because I am a big believer in hospitality, so much so that I wrote this book called The Heart of Hospitality. And the book is a little bit of a journey through Austria, and it traces my background in hospitality. I went to school there many years back, studied hotel and tourism management. And more importantly, I got a flavor for what hospitality means, specifically in the sense of travel and touring around and hotels and so on. And I always have admired how hospitality is done in Austria, because they really are masters at it. And I like to think that I bring a bit of that flavor to our tours. I seek out great hospitality. It's all part of what we are about at Wheel and Anchor. And on that note, part of that is about bringing travelers together, because let's face it, a hospitable environment is one that's created when you have a bunch of people who have a bit of a like-minded view on travel and on the experience, the enjoyment of all the things that you get to see, do, and taste when you're all traveling through all these different places. And so our goal here is to bring travelers together. And in doing so, as you all know that have joined my webinars before, it's about becoming well-traveled and well-connected. And specific to a program like this, and you'll see more and more of our programs are about slowing down the travel. And that's how you really become well-traveled. If you joined a bus tour and you visited, the infamous, 10 countries in 14 days, sure, you will have traveled a lot, but you won't necessarily have been well-traveled. And my view is that when you spend time and you stay in a place and you aren't on the clock the whole time is when you really get the essence of what it's all about. And that's what well-traveled is all about. And of course, because we're a community, you get to meet people who have the same viewpoint, the same philosophy about the experience of going to all these wonderful places, and also meeting locals along the way. If you have time to sit in a little cafe over a cup of coffee, you're more likely to, talk to the person that's next to you and find out where they're from and what life is like, is all about. So that is our goal for you. Joining me on our webinar today. So again, my name is Gordon. I'm the founder of Wheel and Anchor. Joel is not with us today, but Paula, our senior trip specialist. Many of you will have spoken with Paula on the phone. Also a very well-traveled individual, particularly when it comes to the countries down under. So nice to have you with us, Paula, as always. So today, again, there's a couple of things we're going to cover today. First of all, why see France? So we're going to talk a little bit about what's special about France, the regions of France. We'll do a little mini geography lesson, how to see France, so how you could see it on a program like ours versus another way. And I'm going to look specifically at river cruises because I know they're super popular and I love river cruises. So, and also about the Kaleidoscope program itself. We're going to just do a touch on the different aspects of these segments of this trip. And then for those that are really interested, you can go back and look at one of our replays of one of the other programs, of one of the programs that's included in this. So why see France this way is the first question. Because predominantly of the prolonged time that we spend at each stop. So we've got we've got actually 5 stops, but 4 segments to the program. So 4 weeks. The last one is 10 days, actually. We stay in the same hotel and we get to explore not only the town or the city that we're in, but we get to go out and explore the surrounding countryside. And most importantly, we have time to stop and smell the roses, as it were. So for example, if you're somebody that has an interest at all in the great artists like Cézanne and Van Gogh, pardon me, Picasso, then you will particularly relish spending time in and around Aix-en-Provence, which is, of course, the home of Cézanne. In fact, the hotel we're staying in, I'll be there tomorrow, is called the Hotel Cézanne. And not only do we get to see some of the artworks, which of course you can go to the Louvre in Paris and see those, but you understand what it is about the region that inspired these masters to create the type of art that they did. If you're somebody that likes food and wine, then of course, well, needless to say, France is for you. I mean, and who doesn't like food and wine? But one of the segments in our program, which we call Tastes of Eastern France, is all based on Lyon, which is the gastronomic capital of France. And we're going to spend time visiting the markets, understanding the food from the region of Burgundy, as well as how it is. If we're lucky, we'll even spot one of these Michelin star chefs like Paul Bocuse, who is perhaps the best known of French chefs. And we'll also, of course, visit Beaune in Burgundy and experience a little bit about what the wines are like up there. And if you're a history buff, on the other hand, you'll appreciate, for example, the first week of the program where we'll spend it in Bayeux, which is in the region of Normandy, up in northwestern France. And Bayeux itself is a beautiful, beautiful little town, and of course goes back centuries to the obviously the Normans. Originated from this region, the Bayeux Tapestry, which is this incredible 70-meter long UNESCO site that is just not to be missed. But also Normandy, of course, is where the D-Day landing beaches are, and it's an important part of Canadian history as well. So that is why you might like to see France. And specifically, no matter whether you do one or all of these stops, you'll be left with a much greater impression than on a whistle stop tour, like you see here, the classic bus tour with a whole bunch of people following a guy and a flag. And, you know, it's Tuesday, it must be Paris kind of thing. We, as I say, have a very different approach to things. So again, let me give you the geography tour, as you will, of France. And I think for those of you who you probably have some familiar with France already, but where do you go in France? Well, of course, Paris, Île-de-France, which is sort of in the center top, is the most visited place in France. That goes without saying. We didn't include Paris on the program. We'll stop there in our Normandy program, because I think Paris, first of all, is a city that one can explore quite well on one's own, and it's a lot of it is very walkable, and so Paris isn't a part of this particular program. But if you look, for example, to the east of Paris, the Alsace-Champagne region is one place that you might go. Champagne, of course, is so well known, and the area around Strasbourg. Normandy, up in the northwest, of course, as I say, the D-Day landing beaches, and Brittany, which is on the wonderful west coast of France. You've got then the Loire Valley, which is in the center part, known for the Sauvignon Blanc wines and the incredible chateaus. You've got Burgundy and Rhône-Alpes region, which is, of course, where Lyon and the Rhône River is found, not to mention the French Alps. So if you're a winter sports enthusiast, you might go in that part of France. In the southeast, you have Aquitaine, Limousin, the area that goes down to Languedoc-Roussillon. This is where, in Aquitaine, is where you find Bordeaux region, towns like Biarritz on the Atlantic coast, popular for surfers and so on. Languedoc-Roussillon, which is the south coast, again, going down to the Mediterranean. This is where you find the Canal du Midi, the rolling hills of Languedoc, which is actually the biggest wine producing region of France. And then finally down in the southeast part of the country, Provence, and the French Riviera. So if you wanted to cover it all, you need, frankly, quite a lot of time. The idea here is that we are covering some of the highlights of France in these 4 different regions. And so, again, what I was saying earlier about the way to see France, river cruising has become a very, very popular way to do it. And of course, you can cruise up to Normandy from Paris on the Seine River. You can go down the Rhone Valley from Lyon all the way down to Provence. You can cruise on the Garonne in Bordeaux, which goes, from the area around Bordeaux out to the Atlantic Ocean. Or you could do a private barge trip on the Canal du Midi. And so I wanted to give you a little of comparison about how a river cruise would compare to, for example, doing a Kaleidoscope type of program that we've organized. So first of all, I'm going to talk about 5 different aspects of river cruising compared to our Kaleidoscope style of traveling. First of all, let's talk about accommodations. Obviously, one of the big benefits of traveling on a river cruise boat is that you check into your room, you stay there for a whole week. You don't have to check in and out all the time. It's like a floating hotel. River cruise boats have quite comfortable accommodations now. They're on the small side. I mean, typically they're 15 to 17 square meters, so about 150 to 180 square feet, in some cases larger on some of the ships. But this is definitely one of the big benefits to river cruises. Of course, in our case, we also stay in one place for 1 week. We select boutique hotels, usually very close to the center of any of these towns and cities. And although hotel rooms in France are notoriously small, and if you've ever traveled through France, you'll know that they are probably some of the smallest hotel rooms anywhere, I think. But nevertheless, the benefit of being in a hotel as opposed to on a river cruise is that you can leave anytime. There's no sort of timetable or schedule, and there's lots of time in our itineraries to enable you to sort of explore on your own. Let's compare, for example, what it's like the dining on a river cruise. And of course, again, one of the benefits of river cruising is that you always have a predictable menu. You've got a wonderful dining room. The food is generally very, very good. And there's also always the option from the menu to have a burger and fries or something like that. And it's that comfort factor of the predictability and sort of the routine. You have dinner at the same time and in a lovely environment in a dining room, with 100 people. And it's a comfortable and a predictable way to travel. Of course, in our case, we eat where we decide to eat, and so some of the legs of our program, we definitely hand pick some restaurants, and we go out. We do a tasting menu, often in conjunction with a wine tasting or something like that. But importantly, I think, take Lyon, for example, there are so many great restaurants. And so our philosophy is part of the fun of travel is going out and exploring and trying something on your own. And I always say to anyone traveling in France, the best way to pick a restaurant is go down some back alley and say, you'll see some chef poking his head out the door. And that's the place you go in. And undoubtedly, a story will emerge and you'll probably have a great dining experience. And so also you have the choice of whether you want to just go for something simple and quick and have a little sandwich or a slice of pizza, or you may want to try one of the great Michelin star restaurants. So again, that's the difference between the 2 types of travel. Talking about sightseeing again, big advantage of the river cruise is that your floating hotel goes with you. You sail down the river and you pull up somewhere, and then from there you do your trip. Now, it's important, of course, to note that with most river cruises, you sometimes occasionally you will stop in a town, but often it's somewhere outside of the town, and you get on a coach and usually 3 or 4 buses waiting there to take all the groups of people out on their agenda, and you go out and you do your sightseeing, and then you're back in time for lunch. So again, it's a very organized, a very structured program, and certainly a very comfortable way to travel. The way we do our sightseeing is, well, first of all, there's a lot more leisure time included. We go in smaller groups. I'll talk about that in a second. And we go out typically for a few hours. We'll have lunch somewhere along the way at a little brasserie or maybe out in a vineyard to do some wine tasting. And then you'll have the rest of the time on your own. And there's no sort of following the clock. I mean, occasionally if we're out further afield, we may have to sort of go back at the same time. But sometimes you also have the ability to return back on your own. So you have that flexibility and the opportunity to sort of see and do things a little bit on your own pace. We often travel with local trains as well. So it means, so for example, from Lyon to Beaune is about an hour by train. So we can go up for the morning and do our program and see the beautiful city and the cathedral and taste some wine. And then those that want to come back to Lyon can come back right away, or otherwise you can take a train a little bit later in the afternoon. So it's a little bit more flexibility and as I said, less structured than in a river cruise environment. Let's talk for a moment about the leisure time, the entertainment, the fun. And of course, this is one of the things that people appreciate about river cruise boats is that, you know, they have their entertainment evenings on board the ship, and they'll have some musicians come on and they'll perform some, you know, folk music and folk dances. And you know, there's lots of, you know, clapping and applause and sometimes some dancing goes on, like you see in the not so clear picture on the photo. And again, it's a very amicable and fun environment. In our case, our leisure time is a little bit less structured. So on our kind of program, we kind of see what's going on along the way. Sometimes we'll know in advance that there's some special event happening. But what I find is fun, and this just happened to me the other day. I just came from Nice, and I noticed that there was a very cool cabaret playing at the local theater. And I thought, oh, this is going to be something fun to catch, because sometimes that unexpected experience of going out and seeing something that you didn't know that you were going to see, you just decided to go last minute, is part of what I find is the fun of the travel. And of course, you can do that on your own with a few of your other friends that are along on the trip, or whatever you like to do. I mean, so this is again a little bit of the difference. Talking about group sizes, of course, again, the great thing about river cruises is that you've got 150 people to meet that are on the same program doing the same thing as you. So invariably, you have the chance to meet other travelers and enjoy the company of folks from the US and the UK, and a lot of these river cruises draw from the same market. So it's a nice experience to be with all of our other English-speaking friends. Of course, in our case, we go with much smaller groups. We may go with 20 or 24 people, but when we go out to do our sightseeing, we generally like to go with between 8 and 12 people. So we small. It's a more intimate experience, and so you're maybe not going to meet all those other tourists that you would on a river cruise boat. But at the same time, it's also maybe a better chance for us to go and meet some of the locals. So again, that's one of the fundamental differences. And so summing it all up, you can see that there are some great benefits to going on taking like a river cruise or a bus tour type trip through France. But in our case, we've tried to model it and take the best of the one and combine it with that ability to be a little bit more independent and a little bit more flexible. And of course, a big question is always, well, what about the cost? Well, if you look at river cruises now on the Rhone River, which typically they sail between Lyon and the Mediterranean, so Marseille or Arles, for a week's cruise in a standard cabin, you start anywhere around 4,000 Canadian dollars. And if you compare that to a program like we would do, for example, our Lyon and Burgundy, our Taste of Eastern France program, you'd be around $3,600 for the same duration. Now, keep in mind, we don't include all the meals. So there's a few dinners in there that you'd have to pick up and, maybe a lunch or something like that. So you definitely spend a little bit more, but all in all, it's probably it's probably roughly the same price to do a river cruise or to do our France Kaleidoscope style of travel. So let's talk again for a moment about where we're going to go. And this is one of the unique periods of time. We're coming out of this pandemic, and we are really approaching travel in a different way, because I think a lot of us have started to appreciate the benefit of time and the benefit of just experiencing being in the same place. And God knows we've all been in the same place for far too long. And the ideology here again is that while we have worked out the most important details, where we're going to stay, who's going to show us around, we haven't done all the fine details. So we've captured the sense of adventure and surprise. And there's always somebody there if there's a problem, and you always know that there's a bed for you to sleep in at night. And we've got some great things to show you, but at the same time, there's lots of time for you to go and explore and do things on your own. And so on that note, I want to now explain a little bit about just the highlights of each of these segments of France, so you get a sense of what we're going to do. And then, of course, if you're interested in any one of them, then we have already done a webinar on each of these 4 parts. So I'll go on a day-by-day basis into those. So the first part, as I say, Normandy, you can see up to the left of Paris on the map. That's on the Atlantic coast, or actually on the English Channel, technically, and staying in a village, a small town called Bayeux. The second part, down in the eastern part of France, in Lyon, in the Rhone Valley, or where the confluence of the Saône and the Rhone rivers is. The third part is down in Languedoc-Roussillon, so in the very southernmost part of France, on the Canal du Midi. And the final part here in Provence, which is so well known for all of the things that we'll talk about in just a second. So let me touch on a few of the highlights of each of these segments, so that you know what we're talking about. So first of all, let's look at Normandy and the landing beaches. As I said, we're going to stay in Bayeux, a charming, charming little town that is a short drive away from Juno Beach, which is, of course, where the Canadians landed at the end of the latter part of World War II, as well as some of the other beaches where, of course, there are so many fallen soldiers. This is such an important part of our history. We'll visit Mont Saint-Michel, this most famous church that sits on an island out in the middle of the Atlantic. I mentioned Juno Beach already. We'll, of course, sample some of the Norman cuisine. So the Pays d'Auge. This is where you find places like Camembert, which is, we all know, Camembert cheese. This is where you'll find Calvados originated from. That's a brandy that's made from apples as opposed to from grapes. So they're also very well known for their apple cider. So we'll have a chance. So we get a combination between the historical aspect as well as understanding a little bit of the great history of the Norman region. The second part of our trip, again, takes us down to Burgundy and the Rhone Valley, and is all based out of Lyon. So here we stay in a lovely little hotel, Le Grand Hotel Terreau, which is just next to the river, a short walk from most of the old town of Lyon. And we will obviously spend time visiting the markets. Included in this program is a Michelin star dinner at a wonderful up-and-coming Michelin star chef called Jérémy Galvin. We'll do a day trip up to Beaune, as I mentioned before, and experience a little bit about the Burgundy wines and what makes them so special and different compared to wines from the other regions of France. And we'll also do a trip a little bit into the Alps over to Annecy. And on this trip as well, here you get a little bit of shot of Annecy, which is sort of known as the Pearl of French Alps. I can't say enough about the cuisine in Lyon. I mean, the people from Paris will come down to Lyon just because of all of the Michelin star and Michelin rated restaurants that you'll find there. And again, it's not just about the food, but it's the whole experience, the service. It's about understanding how the procurement of food and the growing of it is so integral to French culture. And we'll really get a sense of that while we're in Lyon. Of course, you'll have a day totally at leisure to enjoy the city, to be able to walk around, or you might take the TGV, the train up to Geneva, which is just about an hour and a half away, and you can enjoy the day in one of Switzerland's most important cities, where, of course, the head of the United Nations, the Red Cross, and many other organizations, not to mention that it has a spectacular view of the French Alps. The third part of our trip is, as I said, in Languedoc-Roussillon in the southwestern part of France. And here we're going to do houseboats on the Canal du Midi. In fact, I'm going to be there myself next week on the Canal du Midi, and I'll be reporting back and taking a few clips and tell you what the experience is all about. And here We begin in a town called Carcassonne, which is so well known for this medieval city. It's one of the best preserved medieval cities in all of France. And we embark on our boats. These are 3 and 4 cabin houseboats, basically, like you can see here, all with private facilities. And we make our way down, passing through the most charming villages, this rolling countryside you can see with these sort of flat top mountains in the background around Minervois. We'll do French cooking class along the way. We'll visit the whole canal, which stretches from the Atlantic Ocean to the Mediterranean, has a number of fascinating aspects along the way. You'll pass over aqueducts, you'll pass through tunnels. So the canal actually goes through tunnels in the mountains. And needless to say, there are dozens and dozens of locks. So the whole trip, you're going up, you're going down, you go at a very slow pace. And so that you can walk or even bike alongside the river. So it's a terrific way to get a sense of the French countryside. We'll go out in the morning and we'll collect our breakfast from a little boulangerie, and we'll get fresh bread. And at dinner time, again, we'll be in a different village and we'll head out and try these little rural French restaurants. So it's a wonderful way to sort of get a sense of the rural experience of France. For the last part of our Kaleidoscope trip, we will visit Provence and the Côte d'Azur, which is, of course, known for the lavender fields. The lavender blooms in July and August, but that's not, in my opinion, the best time to come because it's really hot and there's a lot of people here. We're doing this trip, of course, in October, and this last part is 2 parts. We'll do the first week in Aix-en-Provence, which is in a little bit in the western part of Provence, and then the last bit we'll do in the very southeastern corner in Nice on the French Riviera. And along the way, not only are we going to see Aix, which is a beautiful, beautiful town. It's a university town with some incredible buildings, the home of Paul Cézanne, of course, the famous artist. And we'll have plenty of time to sort of soak in the vibe of why he and so many other great masters spent time there. But we'll venture out into the Haute-Provence, which is the villages, the hillsides around. We'll see places like Grasse, where many of the perfumes, it's like the international capital of perfumes because of all the flowers that are gathered from the area. We'll head down south to Marseille itself, which is a town I first visited 30 years ago, more than 30 years ago, when I was backpacking through Europe. And it is completely transformed and gentrified, and they've revived the whole port area. And it's a wonderful place to get a sense of France's second largest city, quite frankly. The Luberon villages, which are on the way to the north of Aix-en-Provence, and of course the city of Avignon, which with the famous Palace of the Popes, all highlights of our trip as we spend a whole week in Aix-en-Provence. From there, we're going to head down by our private van, stopping in Saint-Tropez, which will be a term that many of you will know, one of the jet set capitals on the French Riviera. We'll stop for lunch on our way to Nice. And I literally just came from Nice this morning. I was there for the last 2 days. Wow, the city is absolutely beautiful. It's nicer than Nice. It's nicer than Nice. It is spectacular. And again, a tremendous transformation has been happening to the city. But of course, the Mediterranean coast, the promenade that goes along the seashore is terrific. And the weather in October, I can honestly say, is a lot warmer than I expected. From Nice, we'll visit also Monaco, which is, of course, the enclave of the super rich and famous. And we'll see how this very, very historical town has turned into this place full of skyscrapers, because of course the price of real estate is astronomical. This is where all the rich and famous come to park their money. So that gives you a little bit of sense of what we're going to do. And so I want to give you a bit of an overview of this program, and you can find all of the details, of course, in the respective brochures that we have for each segment, as well as the webinar replays that we have done. So again, looking at the overview of the different segments, you can see where our price point lies. So under $4,000 for each of these weeks, a little bit more because we're spending 10 days down in Provence. all together, if you to do all the programs together, you can see the price shown here. We give a bit of a break if you decide to do more than one segment. We give a bit of a break on the price. And in our programs, as most of our members will know, you pretty much have all of your transportation. We have wonderful local guides. We generally go out in small mini buses, so 16 passenger vans where we will only put sort of 12, 13 people at the most, or sometimes even in smaller 8-passenger vans. For me, the philosophy here is small groups. In fact, just a half an hour ago, I was meeting with Laurent, who's a colleague and a friend, as a guide here from Provence, a lovely chap, and we were discussing some of the wonderful things that he likes to do with his guests. And of course, all of our hotel accommodations with breakfast and all the details which are in the itinerary. If you have specific questions, and now is the time, we're going to have a little Q&A. Any questions about this program, then please do type them into the chat box or into the Q&A box. And of course, you can always reach us by phone, by email, if you'd like to know more. Paula, how are our questions looking here? Have we got any questions, or did I answer everybody's question?
I think most have been answered along the way. There was a question here with regards to transportation in between each of the segments. Whether we're flying or going by land?
We're going by land. So the beautiful thing about France is that it's not a very big country. So from Normandy, so what will happen, for example, from Normandy, the first day of the program is actually in Paris, and then we'll go by coach out to Normandy, and we'll do all of our trips from Normandy by road, and then we'll go back to Paris. And then from Paris to Lyon, it's exciting because we'll take the TGV. That's the high-speed train, goes 340 kilometers an hour, and we will zoom down to Lyon, where we'll arrive in about 2 hours time. And then around Lyon, again, we go by private vehicle, by van, by minibus. And then from Lyon to Carcassonne, again, we go by TGV. And I find that people really love I took the TGV again today to get here to where I am, and it's just such a civilized way to travel. These high-speed trains, and then the last bit we will do by van, because the French Riviera, it takes a long time to go by train, so we'll do it by road.
Nice. It's always nice to have a local help you navigate, traveling around like a local as well, because it can be
exactly.
quite a bit daunting sometimes. Yeah,
exactly. But it's just a great way to go. I see somebody asked a question here about weather in October, because I know we always think, when we think about October, we think about what the weather is like at home. And I can tell you, it's a great time to travel. And that's why we're starting at the beginning of October in the north of France, when the weather is usually a little bit warmer than what we'd have in Canada, but it could still be cool. So I would say typically in the mid-teens. But by the time you get to the south of France, usually at this time of the year, and they always say that the sun shines on the French Riviera, and it certainly has since I've been here, but the temperature, even at the beginning of November, can easily be up in the high teens and the low 20s. So it's what I would say, it's like early fall. It's like September weather at home. So you need a jacket for the evenings, but otherwise the weather is generally lovely. But yeah, I could get a day or two of rain here and there.
It's a nice time of year for sure. So as you can attest to being there right now.
Exactly.
That's fantastic. I don't have any other questions that have come in for me right now. But...
Okay, perfect. Well, that means I've answered everybody's questions. But of course, if you do have questions, please do drop us a note. You know where to reach us. Next week, our program is all about South America. So we talked about our Pacific South America cruise a couple of weeks back. This program, which immediately precedes that one, is called Crossing the Andes. We're going to spend 5 days in Buenos Aires in Argentina, one of my favorite cities anywhere. Then we're going to go over to Mendoza, which is the heart of the wine region of Argentina, not to mention in the foothills of the Andes. We're going to cross over the Andes Mountains by road, and then spend a bunch of days in Santiago, Chile. So that program will, the webinar for that program will be 2 weeks from now on October the 28th. Please do join us for that. thank you so much for joining us on our webinar this week. I look forward to catching up with you. I look forward to reporting back as I make my way through Europe. And we'll see you all on the next webinar in 2 weeks' time.